These attacks has far-reaching implications on economy and, of course, social and relations with the continent and of the world. Well, of course, for now, we're going to cross live to Pretoria. Of course, we understand that the Home Affairs Minister, Malusi Gigaba, is now talking. Let's take a look.
South Africa fought against colonialism and apartheid alongside with our fellow Africans from the continent and the world at large. As a nation, let us not forget the hospitality that was bestowed on us by the peoples of other nations. The law enforcement agencies will do whatever it takes to restore law and order within our communities. Our actions have gone beyond condemnations. We've taken critical interventions which we will share with you. President Zuma appointed the Ministers of State Security, Police and Home Affairs to spearhead the government response to the violence. The team was further strengthened by the President when he tasked the whole Justice, Crime Prevention and Security cluster, as well as the Ministers of International Relations and Cooperation, Small Businesses and Cooperatives Development, Trade and Industry and Social Development, to demonstrate the serious nature with which our government views the violence against foreign nationals. President Jacob Zuma has cancelled his visit to Indonesia. Yesterday, the President visited displaced foreign nationals in Chatsworth to assure them of our support as the government of South Africa. The President also engaged with the Umlazi community to spread the message of peace and tolerance. He will, in the next week, lead a stakeholder outreach program around the country to engage communities to start a conversation within our society. Government reiterates that attacks on any fellow human beings and destruction of property, as well as looting, are criminal offenses and will not be tolerated. As a team of ministers assigned by President Zuma, we have been working closely with the KZN provincial government to arrest the violence. We have in the past week been involved in numerous stakeholder engagements in the communities affected. Meetings have been held with church leaders to appeal to them to preach a message of peace and to ask their followers not to take part in violence. The ministers also participated in the Peace March, led by Premier Senzo Mkhunu, where thousands of people marched to demonstrate their opposition to the violence. A bus called the Peace Bus, consisting of the youth from Gauteng, traveled all the way to KwaZulu-Natal for those young people to be part of the march. Engagements are ongoing with religious leaders broadly, cultural organizations as well as civic structures to build a society-wide front against the violence. The Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Malusi Gigaba, met with the representatives of the African countries. This was followed up by the Minister of International Relations, Ms. Maite Nkwana Mashabane, meeting the members of the African diplomatic community. This was to assure them of our commitment to ensure peaceful coexistence between South African citizens and the peoples from other African nations who live in South Africa. During the apartheid period, many South Africans fled persecution and death at the hands of the apartheid government. Africa opened its doors and became a home away from home for many South Africans. The diplomatic community has been assured of our commitment to resolve the tensions and to continue to build our relations with Africa. The Department of Social Development has provided food, shelter, and other necessities to at least 1,026 displaced persons in shelters in both Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Trauma counseling and debriefing services are being provided to individuals on site at the shelters. Specialized services to children in need of care and protection, including early childhood development programs, are being provided in Isipingo and Chatsworth. Government is working closely with civil society, to provide all possible support to the displaced people as they await reintegration back into their communities. Social development, Govt and community safety are facilitating community dialogues in areas such as Umlazi and Chatsworth to ensure a smooth reintegration process. We would like to thank the non-governmental organizations and ordinary South Africans from all walks of life who continue to provide food and other humanitarian assistance to the displaced persons in areas like Isipingo, Chatsworth, and the Greenwood Park. We request those who require to speak to a social worker for assistance and counseling to make use of the Social Development Trauma Counseling toll-free number 0800 428 428. Government continues to work closely with foreign missions in South Africa to ensure that displaced persons receive all necessary support. Perpetrators are being arrested, charged, and prosecuted. We would take this opportunity to commend members of the law enforcement agencies who acted decisively to prevent bloodshed between two aggressive groupings in the Durban CBD. We believe that their commitment to duty has prevented injuries and even deaths, as well as damage to property that could have happened had the security forces not acted decisively as they did. Our law enforcement officers on the ground are working very hard to ensure that those who are involved in acts of violence are arrested, convicted, and charged and convicted. So far, 307 suspects have been arrested in connections with attacks on foreign nationals and public violence across the country. In the past few days, we have noted a new phenomenon of people who make use of social media to instill fear in different parts of the country. They have been sending out fictitious SMS and WhatsApp messages with fictitious and photoshopped images, warning people of imminent attacks. We would like to thank media who have been responsible in reporting the matter accurately without sensationalism. These messages appear to be orchestrated by elements bent on taking advantage of the unease in communities and instill fear amongst the people. They send hysteria and anxiety both among South Africans as well as the peoples of Africa elsewhere in other countries. Government reiterates its resolve to stem all acts that seek to plunge our country into anarchy. The misinformation that has been taking place in the social media should be condemned by all peace-loving South Africans as well as foreign nationals living in our country and abroad. Government calls on those who are involved in such acts to stop it forthwith. Everyone should exercise their right to enjoy their normal everyday freedoms. Our security agencies are on the ground, and there will be no bus or train of any kind coming to attack South Africans or foreign nationals anywhere. We are determined that if there is any such information that is accurate, we will stop those buses and act decisively. As government, we remain alert. Any credible information that suggests an imminent threat against any community, South Africans will be officially advised by the relevant authorities. We would not communicate through WhatsApp messages and anonymous SMS texts. The National Joint Operational Center, NETJOC, continues to operate on a 24-hour basis to coordinate the government-wide response to this situation. Provincial Joint Operational Structures, PROFJOCs, have also been activated to monitor and cap any potential threats across the 9 provinces of the country. We are constantly reviewing our security arrangements, assessing the current environment, and determining what additional measures may be required. At this point, we are satisfied that the security measures that are currently in place are sufficient to bring the situation under control. Government appeals to the leaders of various sectors of our society to echo government's call on the people to refrain from any activities that may undermine peace, security, and the stability of our country. South Africa is amongst one of the most diverse countries in the world, culturally and economically. We celebrate our diversity. As the team of ministers appointed by the President, the priority is to restore peace and order within the country. Additionally, as the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster ministers, supported by ministers of Small Business and Cooperatives Development, Social Development, as well as Trade and Industry, we have been tasked to address the issues that seem to have caused tensions in our communities, some of which may have been opportunistically manipulated by the criminals involved in this violence. South Africa remains a country that welcomes foreign nationals who contribute to the economic growth of our country as well as the continent. To the countries that continue to invest in South Africa, we want to reassure them that South Africa is a constitutional democracy governed by the rule of law. Investors are welcome to do business in South Africa. Everything is being done to restore peace and order. Government will enforce the laws of the country and will not hesitate to act speedily and decisively on any criminal activity committed by or against a foreign national or citizen of South Africa or those found to incite violence. We also want to issue a stern warning to those who lend themselves to acts of public violence. We will find you, and you will be dealt with to the full might of the law. You will be arrested and sentenced accordingly. We warn especially young people, as having a criminal record can disrupt their lives. We urge people with informations on plans to cause violence or those who have witnessed acts of violence to contact one of the operational centers either in the relevant province or at national levels. The numbers will be provided to members of the media for your record and publication. Finally, we would like to thank South Africans for their overwhelming support, those who have stood as true South African ambassadors and reflected the South African spirit of Ubuntu and the value systems upon which this new democracy is being built. In various parts of the country, community members have stood in defense of foreign nationals living amongst them. We have also noted messages of support, condemnation, and solidarity on social media. This provides testimony that the overwhelming majority of South Africans are against the violent attacks against our brothers and sisters from other African continents. We wish to reiterate the statement that now is the time for South Africans to stand together to stem the tide of violence which has swept across our country. But at the same time, we also wish to reiterate this point that we need to agree on the urgent need to bring the violence to an end and not engage in any bickering or cheap political point scoring amongst ourselves. The leadership of the country and the people of South Africa need to stand united against the perpetrators of this violence and those who might be orchestrating it behind the shadows. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. At this point, I'll take questions. Griselda, you were the first one, and followed by you at the back and the right. Yeah, let me take one more. Let me start with Griselda.
Good morning, I'm Griselda Lewis from SABC Television News. To anyone who perhaps wants to answer this question, we saw in KwaZulu-Natal yesterday the reception that was received by President Jacob Zuma, some foreign nationals saying that they believe that the government acted too late on the issue. I'd like to get your response to that, because similarly, you'll find that the questions that are being raised now are the very same questions that were raised in the xenophobic violence that we saw several years ago. They're stealing our jobs, they are criminals. It's basically the same thing. The second question would be, what happens to South Africans who are in other countries that are coming under attack? What's government's plan for those South Africans? What should they do?
Okay, thank you. Fine.
Good morning, I'm Parashni Govt from Reuters. Can you give us an update on the current death toll of foreigners? Also, how many people are currently in camps? And there's a lot of allusion to this being orchestrated by someone. Who exactly is it? You know, can the government share that with us?
I think there was, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. School. My question is directed to Minister Mahlobo. Were you surprised by this? If not so, what action did you do in order to deal with this before it erupted? Because last year we had this in Soweto. Don't you have structures in your department that can maybe foresee or deal with these things before they erupt? My second question is a general one. It's based on that you have been tasked to address the issues that seem to have caused tension within communities. Were you always aware of these issues, or what are the issues at the moment that seem to have caused this? Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was two. Yeah.
Yes, my name is Palamile Hlubi from ENCA. I'd just like to ask, can we also please get clarity on the number of people arrested, but in particular, how many people have been arrested for the death of foreign nationals in the country? I'd like this, if we can have statistics that differentiate between public violence and those arrested for the death of foreign nationals. Secondly, I'd also like to find out about repatriation. I've been hearing, reintegration rather. I've been, from last week, especially in Ekurhuleni, local officials were already talking about reintegration of foreign nationals into the communities. I'd like to understand what government's plan is around that issue, because before you can reintegrate, you first have to assure and be absolutely sure that the community into which they're being integrated into will accept them, and that these flare-ups won't happen again. So I'd like to understand more detail around that, please. Thank you.
Next year.
Thank you, Dylan Esalo from Power FM. Linking up to my colleague's question, the Zimbabwean Exiles Forum said they came a week before the attacks in KZN to the JP's Town police station and showed police their SMSs and WhatsApps threatening violence towards foreign nationals, and they were ignored. Perhaps the Minister of Minister of Police can answer that. And then also, are there any plans to actually go to the hotspots funded by government, not just the refugee centres? Speaking to some of the Zimbabwean members of the Exile Forum, they're saying that these attacks seem to be more coordinated than 2008. And on Friday night, it did seem like they were moving from one hostel to another. If you can just comment on that, thank you.
I think I'll take the last one from you, sir.
I'm from China Central Television, and the attack in South Africa caused the concerns among Chinese people, both in China and South Africa. And as I know that one Chinese businessman, her shop was robbed in the CBD area of Durban. How can they protect themselves? And do you think that the Chinese nationals are the main target in this attack?
Thank you. I think I will allow the ministers and the team to take this question, and then I will go to Cape Town thereafter.
Well, thank you very much. With respect to the questions asked, the others Minister Gigaba will respond to. But with respect to the first question that Priscilla asked about the reception on President Zuma, we should be able to indicate that President Zuma was accompanied by the two ministers, were there, live experience. Secondly, with the leadership of KwaZulu-Natal, the MECs were there, including the mayor and other people that were there. What we know is that President Zuma has acted very decisively. When this matter actually came to the fore, President appointed 3 ministers to deal with the issue. And Minister Gigaba was on the ground first. Secondly, there's been visible leadership on the ground by both councillors, the leadership of the 2 provinces. Ourselves lately, we've been strengthened by the President to bring all the ministers of the cluster and the other ministers that have been mentioned. Therefore, to create an impression that President has not acted is not true. Personally, with Minister of Police, Minister Gigaba, we've been to all those temporary shelters. We've been to Ispingo, we've gone to Phoenix, where certain people were staying in the police station. We've gone to Chatsworth, and the third one, have interacted with those particular communities, have seen the conditions where we've put them in, and how are we protecting them. Therefore, the time when the president when this incident actually happened, apart from appointing us, he then issued a very important statement at the time when there was a commemoration of Comrade Krizani in Bosberg, where he asked all of us as South Africans and non-South Africans to calm down, condemn the violence. Subsequent to that, we are on record that the president has addressed the country. When he addressed the country in Parliament, and equally so, President did actually send the Minister of Nhleko, supported by the two ministers that are here. We address the diplomatic representatives of African countries. And we had a very good discussion to deal with this. Government has been at work. Additionally, we have engaged a number of leaders. Currently, Minister of Police is not here. He is engaging with religious leaders that are very influential in the country. The three of us we have also met with the king to deal with these issues. Then when President actually went himself down there, it was a continuation of government response. There has been a good government response. Therefore, whether people say it was too late for President to come, my understanding is that we've not been sleeping, including these gentlemen that are keeping the country safe. We've done our part. Well, the question of South Africans in the other continent, in the parts of the continent, we know that there are incidents. An incident actually happened in Mozambique, but we can report that there was no South African that was injured. Even the incident that happened at Libombo border gate, we are working with our African counterparts, including the issues that were related to some of our entities that are doing business in the continent. Therefore, we have just ensured that our embassies working with those particular governments, they are able to deal with a situation where some other people in other parts of the continent would want to think it is correct to retaliate. But what we know, there is the negativity that is coming up because of the advent of technology. The messages that have been coming up, they've created tension. That's why I call Minister Gigaba when he was reading the statement. Some of the photos that some people have been circulating around the world that are actually not actually true, they've actually caused tensions, and we are getting a lot of statements, even a fallacious statement like attributed to Boko Haram that we are ready to deal with that. On fatalities, we have said there are 7. Over the last 2 or 3 days, General Mawela, no one has passed on. No one has died over the last 3 days.
It's only that one. It's only that one of Alexandra.
The Alexandra one that we actually got of the stadium. But the number that we can tell you now is that we are having 7 that have died. 3 are South Africans, and 4 are non-South Africans. But the police, as we have said, they are working very hard. We have not decided to actually try to separate the figures to say this one is for this, but we know, for an example, the incident that happened in Durban where the woman was shot, the perpetrator was arrested.
Yes.
The numbers of people that have been arrested, they currently stand at 307. The last one I will respond to, Comrade Malusi, is a question of intelligence. Well, we have repeated our message. The incident that has sparked this xenophobic attack, it was not a security matter. It was first an incident that happened through industrial relations that some employees are practicing in one area in ECP. where a particular incident happened where certain people were actually dismissed, others were hired. At a particular point, there was a reaction by community. And then ultimately it led to the shooting incident of a South African woman by a non-national. Then that actually created a flare-up because there have been issues, we are correct, there have been issues in South Africa about the socio-economic conditions of our people. But over the last 21 years, we must report, we've done well. But this government has admitted that the question of poverty, unemployment and inequality is a challenge of our time. But we never only said it's a challenge of our time. We did put plans. That NDP, which is our blueprint for the future, was a response by government. You know, when President Zuma addressed the nation early this year, he gave a very concrete plan. What are we doing in addressing those issues, including the 9-point plan? Therefore, to suggest that we are doing nothing, that will not be correct. When the issues of intelligence being on the ground, they are on the ground. As I have said, we are on the ground looking at various issues. But to secure the country, we will also need South Africans to play their part. People who has evil intentions, they stay within us. That's why in our own statement, we have said that the question of community involvement and mobilization will be very key. We do receive in messages, we act. Even the kind of operation that the country is relatively stable today is because of the intelligence operations. Remember, we have military intelligence, we have crime intelligence and state security. We have the handling of the situation. We're very confident. But in certain instances, people who are coordinating their own evil deeds, they are sometimes a little bit tricky, some few steps ahead. But in most of the instances, it's not that the incident actually doesn't happen, it's that when it happened, can we be able to prevent it? If we can't prevent it, can we ameliorate it? And in our case, we are very confident that we've done well. The others I will ask the Minister to deal with and the other colleagues.
Thanks.
Sorry, my question around, my apologies, Minister, I don't mean to interrupt, but I was asking for specifics. Out of the 300 who've been arrested, how many have been arrested for the death of foreign nationals?
Well, I did respond.
Yes.
I've said in the statement we have not decided to go to the details, but I know an incident where the first actually casualty who was actually shot in Devon. That person was apprehended. There are other cases that are also being followed because other ones are actually still subject of investigation, but we have not broken down the 307. Probably, my understanding, this is not our last briefing, but the issue is to say we still have to do more. The main issue here that we must be able to communicate to South Africans, government has responded decisive. There was a time when arrests were just mere less than 60. About 2 days ago, we were at 197. By last night, we're at 307. The security services are hard at work, but they've also been depending more on the support of communities who are volunteering that these are the kind of people we know and we have evidence that they are involved in this. And we are very confident in terms of actually even doing prosecution because in the net joint, we even have the National Prosecuting Authority. We have dedicated courts, dedicated magistrates. We also have dedicated prosecutors, including legal aid, those who can't afford. We are using the model of the 2010 World Cup so that there can be a speedy prosecution because our message is very simple. We will deal decisively with those who break the law and crime does not pay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I want to comment on the issue of sharing of information with the police. We do have systems in place. Our intelligence community comprising of the crime intelligence, state security and defense intelligence, who are on the 24-hour basis monitoring even the social media network, monitoring all the messages which are being sent all over the country. So every time when they see those messages, they don't ignore them. They follow them up. They analyze those information and advise the operational people so that we can follow them up and put contingency measures or mitigating measures in response of those messages. If there were people who visited GP police station to come and share the information with our police officers there, and they decide to ignore that, it's something which we can follow it up. But we like to assure the South Africans that any information which is shared with us and information discovered by our intelligence community, we do follow it up. The issue of GP hostel, we did gather information about the intention of those people, and that is why we proactively deployed the police officers there. And due to our deployment, that is why we have averted more damage. We have averted the death of a lot of people. But those police officers who have ignored the information, it's a subject which it will be followed up. Thank you, Ministers.
Thank you. Let me start by saying the people who were a bit agitated yesterday in Chatsworth are largely Malawian nationals that were protesting that their request for voluntary repatriation had been delayed. There were two problems. The first problem was that the buses which were supposed to pick them up, organized by their embassy, had not arrived. And yet, those from other countries were being repatriated. The second challenge was that the people who, the immigration officers that were assisting with documenting them for their repatriation, you must remember that whether somebody comes to South Africa as a documented or undocumented migrant, when we deport or repatriate them, we take their fingerprints, particularly those who are undocumented, for future reference. Now, the processing of their papers was being delayed by the fact that the volumes kept increasing when the capacity we had on the ground was insufficient to deal with increasing volumes. What we then decided subsequently in discussion with their embassies was that we are going to facilitate their repatriation anyway, but whilst they are on their buses home, before they get to the port of entry where they would exit South Africa, we would then sign them up, take their biometric details, so that we ensure that we can do this whilst they are mobile. It then would alleviate their anguish and distress which they were demonstrating then. And so you could see that they were not demonstrating against the president, because their issue was they want to be repatriated. And so our view was that we would. But the president was very clear on two issues yesterday. The first is that we do not wish you to leave the country, especially not under this cloud. Secondly, that in the future, even those who have left the country, should they wish to return, they are welcome in South Africa, having followed proper procedures. It's quite clear to us that the situation that has taken place, the peddling of information and photoshopped images, all of these are intended to cause strains in our relations with our neighbors and with the rest of the continent, and to ruin the reputation of our country in the international community. And that's why we've welcomed the president's decision not to attend the state visit and the other activities in Indonesia, but to send the deputy president. You know, the point about how did this start for example, this company which employed scab labor consisting of exclusively foreign nationals at Isiping, had the people not taken the law into their own hands, we would have prosecuted the management of that company. Because the immigration law is very simple and straightforward. No company in South Africa, including private individuals, have a right to employ undocumented immigrants, especially those who do not have work visas in South Africa. Now, if this company having done that, the people reported to us, we would have sent inspectors immediately on site to investigate the company, to charge the management of the company, and probably achieve successful prosecution against it. By taking the law into their own hands, they denied us the opportunity to do exactly that, which would have assisted not only the workers of the company that had gone on strike and were suspended or dismissed, but that would have assisted other companies around the country and other workers who might find themselves in similar situations. When immigration officers and police came to the company, the company then said to them, well, we don't have any foreign national who's been employed here. You can go through our records. Surely, no company would put on their records undocumented scab labor. But if we had pounced on them, we would have been able, most probably, to find these workers on site and therefore to take the necessary action. I think this is a lesson that people shouldn't take the law into their own hands, because from where we sit, we know better how to deal with instances of this nature. The Department of Home Affairs conducts regular inspections of companies. A few months ago, we conducted these inspections in a lot of companies around Johannesburg, working with the Joburg Metro and the SAPS, where a lot of companies were found not to be certificated. A lot of shops were found not to be certificated and were employing people who are undocumented, and we took action against those. Over the next 3 years, the department will be spending about 118 million rand recruiting immigration inspectors to assist precisely in this effort, so that we can ensure that companies do not breach our immigration legislation by employing people who have no right to work in South Africa. That excludes those who have a right to work. Now, in regard to those who have a right to work, we've been insisting, and the Department of Labour has also, the CCMA ruled in our favor in that regard about several years ago, that every foreign national who is employed in South Africa must be employed in accordance with the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, so that no foreign national or immigrant employed anywhere in South Africa lowers wages and basic conditions of employment. But we've also been agitating trade unions in the same manner they did with mine workers from Lesotho and Mozambique, to actually unionize immigrant workers in South Africa, especially those who have the permit, who have a permit to work, to ensure that they don't then get preferred over South African workers, because South African labor is viewed by companies to be expensive due to the basic conditions of employment and unionization. The same should apply to immigrant workers in South Africa, to create that parity and ensure, therefore, that workers can get employment not on the basis that they will be employed below the living wage, below the basic conditions of employment, but to ensure that they can all be employed in terms of the same legislation. That would address the concerns which are being raised with regard to jobs and other things. Again, with regard to crime, we have said that if people have information, report that to the police so that the police can act. If people have concerns about their local police officers not acting on reports of crime, they must report to the police secretariat so that we can be able to take action against those police officers. The reality here is you have foreign nationals committing crime in South Africa, and you also have South Africans committing crime both in South Africa and abroad. Now, you don't see those South Africans abroad being chased down the streets because they have committed crime in those other countries in Brazil and elsewhere. There are many immigrants that are in our prisons having committed crime, and the immigration legislation in that regard is also very clear. If an immigrant, whether they are documented or undocumented, commits crime in South Africa and gets sentenced, as soon as they are released, we deport them. We repeal their permit, whether it's a temporary residence permit or it's a permanent residence permit. We repeal the permit and deport that person. So people must trust in the laws that we have as a country to manage the situation. There are other concerns which they have raised, which I think that we have addressed, and we will continue to address the nation on those to indicate the steps that we are taking to deal with some of those concerns. But our view is quite clear. There is nothing, no concern or grievance justifies the violence that we have seen perpetrated against foreign nationals, in which situation even South Africans have fallen victim. None whatsoever. And I think it's also a great concern to us that South Africans abroad have been immediately put at risk because of these activities. We have not yet heard of instances where there have been physical attacks. There were reports at the Libombo port of entry and in one of our neighboring countries, but those reports have not been widespread to all of the other countries. What we did after our meeting with the African diplomatic community yesterday, we sent a message to all our ambassadors across the African continent and the world, advising them of the steps government is taking, asking them to brief the governments of those countries and to report to us immediately should any South African be put at risk, or should they hear reports that any South African has been put at risk as a result of this. But I think that it covers. Then the question about the Chinese nationals. No, the violence is really not directed at Chinese nationals. None, not at all. The victims everywhere have not been Chinese nationals. Pakistani nationals have had some of their shops also looted, but no Pakistani national has lost their life or been injured in this circumstances. This violence seems to be directed exclusively at African immigrants that are in South Africa. And we're dealing with that. And the irrationality of it all is that as it happened in 2008, you might have instances where even now some South Africans, because of their different ethnic origins, in the areas where there is a flare-up, end up becoming victims. We need to be cautious of this. But I must say finally that among the people who have been arrested and who are being arrested are those who are publicly inciting the violence. We know them. We know them. Many of them have been on your news reports with their names. Those people, some of them have already been arrested, and we are going to continue to arrest anybody who incites violence, and we will spare nobody, regardless of your standing in South African society. You have no right to incite violence in our country, and so we are taking action against all of those people. Now, the question about the coordination of the attacks, we have been observing an element of that. Some of the people being moved around, the groups of people who assembled in Durban, they surely had been coordinated. Somebody gave them the means of transport to come to town to cause the mayhem, and we stopped them. We are investigating all of those to establish whether this coordination, is it just out of what has been called the anger in communities, or does it have any other spurious purpose? But we are looking at all of those instances. But as we say, our priority at this stage is not to look at conspiracies and this, that, and the other. Our priority at this stage is to stop the violence, stabilize the country, reintegrate the people. Yes, we are engaging. As we have said, in the course of the next week, our main focus is going to be re-engaging the communities for reintegration. The President will participate in some of those activities, and we want to reintegrate the people so that they carry on with their lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think I will only entertain Cape Town at this point. They haven't asked.
There's one about reintegration.
Yes.
Just quickly, on the question of reintegration, we are correct that the conditions must be okay to reintegrate. Well, we know that in KwaZulu-Natal, and we have reported yourselves, we've been on the ground, communities are being spoken to. In the areas where we are starting to see stabilization, those people are going back. But we are also going to ensure that there is a quick reintegration of those people who get internally displaced because just of a scare messages. For an example, there are certain areas where there is no incident that has happened, but people are coming in big numbers. But while people are being reintegrated, the security implications in those communities is taken into account in terms of visibility. In all the hotspots in the affected provinces, the 2 provinces, were there in full force. We have your police very visible. Our intelligence services, they are on the ground. We are very content that those who go back, they will have no problem. The coordination and visiting hotspots is not a new thing. In all the hotspots, we have visited them more than once. As we have said, even yesterday, the President was on the ground. In our own statement, we are indicating that the leadership of Cabinet, led by the President, equally the premiers are leading from the front, would be on the ground engaging communities, including other stakeholders, the church leaders, traditional leaders. Tomorrow the King is also having one meeting in Durban. Therefore, the engagement with society is happening in all fronts and is starting to pay results.
Thank you. Cape Town?
Yes, we do have a question in Cape Town. Chairperson,
okay.
Good morning. My name is Baba London. I'm just Minister Gigaba. The fourth National Policy Conference of the ANC 2012, amongst other recommendations, recommended awareness programs to be, implemented to combat xenophobia against narrow nationalism. Has that, and these programs of this kind have any been implemented anywhere in the country? And would this not be a good time, perhaps, to maybe speed them up now that we're talking about reintegration of those affected? And linked to that, it also noted that undocumented migrants pose an economic and security risk to South Africa. Is that the government's position as well? And just quickly on the meeting with diplomats from other countries, which countries exactly? Minister, it's not quite clear in the statement. Can you maybe give a specific diplomats from which countries? Thank you.
That was all, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I'll entertain some more questions this side. I'm seeing Nicholas.
Good morning, Ministers. Nicholas Barr from ENCA. First, let me commend you on the police and government's work. You have been largely able to contain this violence in comparison to 2008 at least, but are you also going to do better when it comes to prosecutions than in 2008? Because a lot of people are wondering if there are hardly any people sitting in jail for the some 40 people that died in an absolutely horrible manner in 2008, and no foreigner has ever been compensated for damages. What will be different now? And what's the long-term plan to deal with this? Because in January we had the exact same type of attacks in Soweto, and foreign nationals tell us on the ground that violence and intimidation against them is a daily occurrence. We just don't report on it and we don't hear about it. So what are you going to do to ensure that we aren't sitting in July with the exact same problem? And last but not least, the messages warning of mass xenophobic violence and intimidation on the streets of Johannesburg and elsewhere that were sent over SMS and email. State Security Minister Mahlobo, have you found out the source of those messages, and what are you going to be doing about it? Thank you.
Anna?
Thank you so much, Clement Banyatela from AN7. I just want to ask about some information, General Mawela, you talk about information that is shared with the police and you act on it. On Thursday, we came across some flyers in Isipingo, written in Zulu, posted on poles on the corners of the streets, saying they're giving foreign nationals 3 days to leave the country. Did you follow up on that? I know I took 2 of the flyers and I gave them to the police officers that were at the Isipingo temporary tent. I want to know if you perhaps investigated that. Do you know who the distributor of those flyers are? My second question is on the distribution of wrong images. Minister Mahlobo, you also talked about it at the march, that there are images that are posted on social media that are attributed to the recent xenophobic attacks, but they're as old as 2008, and some of those images, the incidents didn't happen in South Africa. Are you looking at perhaps charging those people? Will there be repercussions? Thank you.
Yes, the gentleman next to you.
Angelo Coppola from China Central Television. Question for, I guess, the State Security Minister. On Friday night in Alexander, we were following the police around for a couple of hours, and not on one occasion, but on numerous occasions, they didn't chase the criminals who'd either broken into a shop or who'd attacked somebody or set alight a tire or a car down the alleyways because they were too scared to go down there without backup. I need to understand what it's going to take to put visual policing into those areas and why it hasn't been happening yet. Although you are reactive, there's no proactive arresting that we can see. And then a question for Minister Gigaba. We understand that around 1,000 odd Zimbabweans will be going back through Bite Bridge and other border posts. I'm just curious if Home Affairs have made any preparations to allocate those or to facilitate that movement of those large numbers of Zimbabweans, because on the other side of the border they can only accommodate 1,000, I believe. Thank you.
Yes, at the back.
My name is Betty Dibia from Channels TV Lagos. I just want to stay in Alex regarding Emmanuel Sitole. Has anybody been arrested, and what information can you share with us? Thank you.
Yes, at the back.
Thank you, Kulegan Makubana from Business Day. Wanted to find out regarding earlier this year when violence and attacks on foreigners had emerged. It emerged that there was an early warning system which was promised after the 2008 attacks, and that was quote unquote not working. I just wanted to find out what were the dynamics behind that, and secondly, you've already reassured investors that are in South Africa about the state and that you are on the ground and that you're monitoring the situation. Are you able to reassure investors that are in the continent who might be having jitters over speculation that there'll be a crackdown on investors from South Africa? Thank you.
Yes. I think I want to take the last two. There's the lady and then just, the next one.
Thank you. Minister Gigaba, CNBC Africa here. I just want to get a sense of what this has done in terms of the diplomatic relations with other African countries. I know that I've read, reports of what other governments, authorities have said, statements they've made, and they seem to be alluding to the fact that, the South African government should do more, almost giving a sense that not enough is being done. I just want to understand what this could potentially do to diplomatic relations. You said not to take too seriously of, the messages going around, but there's also reports that I've picked up on talking about, other countries potentially, boycotting South African goods, which would have, serious ramifications given the fact that South Africa does export a lot into the rest of the continent.
And then the last one.
Good day, everyone. My name is Johnny Sai. I'm with the African News Agency. I just wanted to ask, please, there are many reports alleging that the King's Wellington is one of the causes of the xenophobic violence. How much of a role is government playing to involve him in the healing process? And is there any action that you are taking against him? If so, specify the action, please. Then secondly, Minister Gigaba, I just wanted to ask, please, the number of repatriated immigrants. Now, do you have a number of, not only Zimbabweans, but other nationals, all immigrants? Do you have a number of immigrants being repatriated as yet? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, thank you, Sis Pumla. The other questions we'll share. But firstly, the question about which countries attended. All the 53 countries attended our meeting with the Minister of International Relations and Cooperations that have their own representation in our country. Therefore, there was no country that was not there. And you reported that meeting was a success. The diplomats actually, they were very sad about the incident that has happened here. Reassured them that they will work with us as a South African government and people, but more importantly indicated that we should be actually working together like the other activities that Minister Gigaba spoke to about other people that have decided to say they need to be repatriated. Well, on the issues of the impact on the diplomatic relations, we have a program here that we approved as a cluster. One element is about international relations issues. When, after we've met, like we've said, all our ambassadors, they were sent an aid memo, which is a briefing note, given clear instructions that they must meet with all the leadership of those countries where we were posted. In our case, the 47 countries where we have our missions, all our ambassadors, they've done that particular work. But more importantly is that even the other ambassadors that are outside the continent of Africa, just to reassure that government has the situation under control. What are we dealing with to ensure that we secure all nationals that are within the country, irrespective whether you're a South African or not a South African. We can also note that there has been no formal government position in other parts of the globe to say they are going to actually boycott our products. But there are certain individuals in other countries who have raised serious concerns, other lobby groups that they have said that probably a particular message must be sent to South Africans. We have seen in one or two examples in our missions where other individuals and groups have started to march there to condemn these particular attacks. But at this stage, as we are saying, the international work that we are doing deals with those particular issues. Around improved prosecution, you will know that we have a record. We have a record in 2010 when there were incidents that actually were related to the Soccer World Cup. There were speedy prosecutions in dealing with these particular issues. Remember the incident of 2008 happened even before the World Cup. The same mechanism when we met with the National Prosecution Authority that are sitting in the net joint, supported by the Department of Justice. Additional prosecutors have been put in place. Additional magistrates have been put in place. We have also indicated that even legal aid, because some of the issues that delays some of these cases, people have a right to actually have a representation in our own constitution. But those 307 cases that we are dealing with, and with the support of the evidence that certain communities as well calling, if you have any evidence about some individuals, would be able to prosecute them very speedily. We are very confident about doing that. It's not that this is just a new experience in terms of dealing with those issues of prosecution. With regard to the long-term plan, remember that when we went out to campaign and won the elections as the ANC, one of the biggest issues was to deal with the socio-economic conditions of our people. We had to come up with a clear plan that has to deal with the issues of the economy. The own establishment by our president of a minister that is responsible for small business and cooperatives is one of those particular things that we're dealing with. If you look at the incident that happened in Soweto in January, you will know that despite that particular incident and the issues of concern raised by the local traders, already the Premier of the province had announced a clear program called the revitalization of township economy. This is a program that the Minister of Small Development is already on board. Even the composition of our own team the team that the president has strengthened, it takes into account the other underlying issues. We have the Minister of Trade and Industry here. We have the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. We also have the Minister of Small Business Development that are being brought on board. When we're in KwaZulu-Natal on Tuesday, we actually did with Minister Gigaba and Premier Mchunu address even small business and local traders in the City Hall. The provincial government at that particular point, they were unveiling a 6-point plan to say what are they going to do to stimulate their rural economies, but also township economy. There are a lot of other things that we are doing, including the same program that the president announced of the 9-point plan to deal with our issues around the issues of economy, so that we can deal with the issues that are related to poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The question of the distribution of the material. The security services, they are those guys who are actually responsible for monitoring the cyberspace. Too much is happening in the cyberspace. We are actually looking at the origin of those particular ones. We also have some of the people that actually have been identified. Who are these people who are creating these images? These people that are circulating them. It's the same issue about the people who are actually instigators in various communities. We know who are these instigators are, and we are going to spare no effort in actually bringing them to book, because some of those people, for one reason or the other, they are using the plight of our people to actually hijack the genuine concerns of our people for other means. Therefore, we have no problems in terms of dealing with these people. We have that particular capacity as a state, just to monitor the cyberspace, who creates this, and what are we doing, including the same issues of distribution of material. There is too much material that is being distributed, either on the social platform or even just on circulars that are actually going there. And those investigations are at an advanced stage. Others, they are actually even making a mistake. You know, someone's profile is there on the system, but you are busy sending messages that are inciting violence. Some of them, they are actually messages of racism, tribalism, that we're actually starting to be getting here. Some of these messages are the messages that actually has caused the numbers of internally displaced people to increase, where someone can come and say, this evening, we're coming back. And you start people seeing them picking away from their homes. They leave their homes unattended. Then this starts within our own communities. When those people are displaced, then they go and actually commit crime in dealing with those. The Alexandra incident, we know about the incident that there was remember the incident in Alexandra, in as much as we picked, there was police, there was the Joburg Metro in Alexandra. I remember that General Mawela and the other people were waiting until very late. A backup was actually brought in Alexandra. We are correct. Remember, one of the things that what you could do, the reaction of the police, the first thing is to secure lives. Well, we know that incidents of looting did happen, but the first thing when they go to the scene, they normally get blamed to say secure life, at the same time you must secure assets. Sometimes it's not possible all the time. But I know that by around 2300 at night, even before that, the backup was brought on board. They actually brought that situation under control, because when that incident actually flared up, at the very same time incident was flaring up in Klerksdorp, in Orkney, those other areas that are closer to Gauteng but who are part of the Northwest. That response by the police, including the MEC for safety in Gauteng, she was there on the spot dealing with the situation of Alexandra. Alexandra is actually calm now. Yesterday, which was Saturday, our visibility is still there. The most important thing that was very clear is that there was no loss of life, except the incident of Stole that we have mentioned, of which General Mawela will be able to speak to. The assurance to investors, Comrade Malusi will deal with that one. The question of the king, should I deal with it? One, there was this funny, funny article that you apologized this morning. Some of us were in the meeting. the Minister of Police, Minister of Home Affairs, and the Minister of State Security and the Premier, we attended the meeting. We had a very good meeting with the King, where we're discussing the issues that have flared up in the country, the role that all leaders in government, leadership that actually is there in society must play. And our discussion was very fruitful, that we agreed on a number of steps. One of the steps is the culmination of the meeting that is going to happen tomorrow. But that issue to say that government must start making condemnation of other people, we're very clear to say what is government position. When we spoke with the King, he indicated that he was actually being quoted out of context. But more importantly, we know that when there was a meeting of a church service, he did send his representative, one of the priests there, to read a statement saying no to violence and killing. But more importantly, we know that the King in KwaZulu-Natal is one of the important partners that government should be able to work with in terms of dealing with those particular issues. Except that one gets surprised where people behave as if they were in that meeting. We chose not to tell the details of our meeting. We're just few of us. We went there to do certain things. We never did those. But we are working with the King. Like Premier Mtune has made an announcement to say what will happen, of which the ministers, the president has assigned. We should be there tomorrow to deal with those issues. On the early warning system, we do have early warning systems as government from an intelligence point of view. That's why we are able to deal with certain issues. But there are certain issues that even if you have an early warning system, do you have the capacity to respond and respond time-wise? For an example, one of the work we do, we look at government service delivery failure and say that probably in this community there is no water, communities are complaining about 1, 2, 3. But some of our municipalities, they are indebted. You find that a pipe is leaking, there's a pothole, there's problems about housing, even if you report to them. But if the resources are not there, they will not be able to respond time-wise. It does not necessarily mean that information was not at the disposal of the state. Even the operations that you see that we are conducting here, we can't actually decide to say where do we deploy our security forces if we don't have the early warning system, but more importantly, including the intelligence-driven operation that the generals they conduct. That's what we always do. Well, we must also admit that there will be lapses like everywhere in the world. There will be lapses even in intelligence. You can check the big countries which have a strong force like the Americans, the French and others. They have been hit before. That's why we always say that there is no country that is not vulnerable. We are all vulnerable, but we are content that with the capability we will have, we'll be able to respond when push comes to a shove in actually securing our national integrity as our country, and including our people and our assets, and more importantly, including our own interests, because our security services, we must also protect South Africa's interest without any fear or faith.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers. With regard to the incident of Mr. Emmanuel Sithole, firstly, we'd like to thank the media and the photographer who captured the sad moment. Those pictures, those photos will be utilized to track down the perpetrators. We have tasked our national tracking teams to can work around the clock to try their level best to track down those perpetrators. And at the same time, we call upon the residents of Alexandra to can assist us. Those who knows those perpetrators, those who may have the information, let them not hesitate to share that information with us so that those people they can be brought to book. And with regard to the matter which the minister have already touched about, the flyers in Sipingo, yes, we have a team of detectives supported by our intelligence community using all their instrument of trade to track down the perpetrators, the people who have printed those flyers, the people who have distributed those flyers. We expect that very soon, once we have a solid case against them, then we start acting on them. Thank you very much, Minister.
Can I add something on Mrs. Tolan? You know, there's something that we did well as South Africans, including the members of the media. When the crew from SABC was marked by the thugs outside the hospital, we were able to use those images, put them all over the country, within a short period of space. That community response, our collective effort, those guys were brought to book, they were arrested. Even with this fellow African who perished in the hands of those three thugs, if we can do the same, we will have done your civil duty to assist the police, because the police alone will not be able to bring these people to book without the support of communities. I will ask even the members of the media just to play that solidarity again. Let's hunt these people down, give them no space to hide.
Thank you. Just the last three questions. Let me say we consider the ambassadors of the different countries in South Africa to be the official spokespersons of their countries, not sources, hearsayers, and all of those. And the ambassadors have not said what is being reported to be said by the unofficial spokespersons. In our meeting with the ambassadors, they were very positive. I think the incidents that you are seeing in South Africa are not unique to South Africa. They've happened in other countries, in some instances not so long ago, with far more disastrous consequences. And they continue to be a challenge. In some instances in Europe, governments get elected merely on the basis of their xenophobic policies. So what you are seeing in South Africa is not unique. We just have a challenge to manage it, given that we are facing different challenges here that need to be managed properly. And surely, as the President himself has repeatedly been saying, South Africans are not xenophobic. You have instances where criminals try to hijack genuine concerns to get an opportunity to loot and commit crime. And there could be those, yes, amongst us who are xenophobic, but the overwhelming majority of South Africans are not. And that's precisely why you have seen an upsurge of positive response among South Africans, providing humanitarian assistance as well as marching. I understand there is a march scheduled for the 21st here in Johannesburg, called by young people who feel they need to take a stand and demonstrate their opposition to xenophobic violence. So we are in discussions with the different ambassadors. We also agreed that as part of his mission, as he has replaced the president in Indonesia, the deputy president will engage the African heads of states and brief them about the situation and talk to the investors, the African investors, and we will also be undertaking similar discussions here in South Africa. Both South African companies investing on the continent and foreign investors, particularly African investors that are investing in South Africa, to talk to them about this situation, because certainly South Africa does believe, and this is a fact, that African immigrants in particular have a very positive role to play in South African society and economy especially. They help us grow our economy, they contribute towards our national security, they contribute towards our national our nation building and social cohesion, and they contribute towards integrating South Africa into the African continent. We value that contribution. We want to encourage more of it, and we think that we need to deal with this situation as seriously as we have been doing in order not to lose that positive contribution of African immigrants in South Africa. With regard to the issues arising out of the ANC National Conference, the first and the broad one was that government needs to review extensively the immigration policy framework. And the Department of Home Affairs is undertaking that extensive review as we speak. I'm sure that you will have heard that we've been having a series of roundtables. There's a lot of consultative processes leading towards the review of the immigration white paper last adopted in 1999. We hope that next year we will introduce a green paper to begin now public consultations towards a new policy framework. And so that element of the ANC conference resolutions is being implemented. The second one regards a campaign against xenophobia. There have been several programs aimed at that. We are going to be announcing others more integrated, more extensive in the wake of our recent experiences. And many NGOs and civil society organizations have been involved in this effort. And so we will continue to work with them towards a similar effort. But we all as South Africans have a common responsibility to combat xenophobia in any possible way. And that includes the media. In some of the ways you report about immigrants in our country, some of the language being used has an effect of causing hysteria in the country and create an impression that South Africa is under siege, particularly by African immigrants, which then increases their vulnerability and risk. And when we, for example, refer to undocumented migrants as illegals, we then dehumanize the person and render them illegal. And by so doing, you expose them to any manner of vulnerability and risk. And so we all have a responsibility to be part, to change the way South Africa views itself in relation to the African continent, because our future depends on the future of this continent, and our failure hinges precisely on whether this continent will fail. And unfortunately, we cannot allow it to fail. We have a responsibility to contribute positively towards its success. And so the campaign against xenophobia and Afrophobia in particular is a very important campaign for us. The third element was the one referred to as undocumented migrants posing a security and economic risk. Yes, it's a fact. We are not saying that all undocumented migrants do so. But what we are saying is that, and that's why we amended the regulations in May last year, and a lot of people got hyped up when we introduced the new amendments. Take a simple example. Just 2 weeks ago, a South African child nearly left the country recruited by ISIS without the company of her parents, but she was going to be trafficked to another country to go be trained as a terrorist. And God knows where she was going to commit her acts of terror. It could just very well be our own country. That brought to mind the correctness of the requirement that no child leaves the country without an unabridged birth certificate. And if that child is traveling with one of the parents, the other parent must provide an affidavit of consent. And if the child is traveling without both parents must provide that affidavit of consent. But would this be the only child that has left the country? That's the question that we all need to ask. Is this the last child that traffickers will attempt to take out of the country? We need to ask that question. Many children would have left the country trafficked to child pornography and other pornography rings elsewhere in the world. These regulations, and as well as the requirement that every foreign national who is coming to South Africa, whether as a tourist or otherwise, must apply in person. We're not going to change that. We're not going to change that requirement. There is no South African who sends a third party when they apply for their identity document. And there will be no foreign national who sends a third party when they apply for a visa to come to South Africa. If you want to come to South Africa, you are welcome. We welcome you. We will open the doors of our country to you. But we need to know who you are. We need your fingerprints and not the fingerprints of the person who submitted the application on your behalf. We need your facial image, not that of your practitioner or your third party that you send to our offices. And so we need to understand the world in which we live, the security and economic risks which we face. Because at times we can naively think that South Africa is immune from the challenges which are being faced in other parts of the continent or the world. But the fact of the matter is that all of those challenges face us too. And all of these incidents in our country highlight the importance of us knowing who is here, how did they come, what are they here for. And that's why we are taking the steps we are taking, the ones we've taken last year and the ones we are now undertaking, the review of the law and the policy framework, the establishment of the Border Management Agency, and the revitalization of the physical infrastructure at our ports of entry, so that we can separate passengers from light and heavy vehicles and be able to scan any vehicle that's coming in and out of the country. But in so doing, we are improving our administrative capacity so that we are able to provide this service in a professional and efficient manner, whilst we are being thorough in addressing the security concerns and interests of our country. Because fact of the matter is that international migration can have positive economic and security effects on the country, but if it is not properly managed, it can have the reverse of that. And we're dealing with that situation in the manner that we are dealing. We know that some people get irritated at times. We accept that, we welcome it. We're not in a popularity contest. We are looking after the economic and security interests of our country, and it starts and ends there. Then finally, with regards to the repatriation, we do not have the figures as yet. I think we can send you the figures once we've collected them from everywhere else. And secondly, yes, our ports of entry are ready. The Deputy Director General for Immigration Services put them on alert yesterday as soon as we took the decision that people will be moving, so that we're able to take. We're not going to allow a situation where anybody leaves without their biometric details being submitted to government. But we're going to do that in a cooperative and collaborative method, so that whilst they are traveling and when they arrive at our ports of entry, we're able to take all of those details and allow them out of the country. Insofar as we are concerned, we are ready. Insofar as our neighbors are concerned, we are not sure. We hope that they will be ready. But the embassies of the nationals affected are on the ground in the different shelters in the country, assisting with the identification of their nationals, their registration, so that they can be transported. Because you also don't want a David Mahlobo being repatriated to Mozambique when he should have gone to Zimbabwe. So we are working with the embassies to manage that situation. This has been a very strenuous situation for all of us, but we have responded to the best extent that we could. And I think the incidents, as Nicholas was saying, prove that the impact of this in this year has been far less than what was the situation in 2008. We continue to be on the ground, working with the different stakeholders at governmental and non-governmental levels. We are confident that we are going to contain the situation. The ministers have had to leave everything to focus singularly on trying to get a positive solution to this situation. And we are confident that we are containing the outbreak of the violence. Thank you.
You have no intention of
Thank you very much, Ministers. We've come to the end of this briefing.
Thank you.
As we had said that this is not the first and the last, we will be convening other briefings where the ministers will be sharing with you the progress that we are doing as government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, my Minister. Thank you, my Minister. Oh, Lulu, hi.